So good morning. Linda and I spoke about healthy desire, and today I'm going to tie that into the teachings of Vedana. So I'm going to read a paragraph that Linda and I read on Sunday. Discerning what feels good from what is good, good for the environment, good for our development, good for our community, good for our communities, good at this time, and under the current conditions, ethically good. This is complicated and not easy to know. So that ties right into the teachings of Vedana, which is about feelings, feeling good, feeling bad, feeling neutral, or another way it's stated is neither good nor bad. Now, this is also the teaching of Vedana in terms of where it fits into the Buddhist teachings. It is the second sphere of the on the foundations of mindfulness, or the spheres of awareness or mindfulness. And Vedana is often described as the feeling tone, not feeling tone in the way us Westerners think about emotion, because emotion is actually a more complex and complicated thing. But Vedana is really, does it feel good? Does it feel bad? Does it feel neither good nor bad? Now, of course, good or bad is not like a static, solid thing. It could feel, kind of good, or just a little bit good, or it could feel very good or superlative, or everything in between. But still, on that end of the continuum, the goodish side of the continuum. And the same, it parallels with that unpleasant, because also it's called good or pleasant, by the way, or it could be, or unpleasant or bad. It feels bad, it feels unpleasant, it feels yucky, it could feel awful or disgusting, just a little bit, doesn't feel quite right, and everything, of course, in between. Now, that feeling tone, that Vedana, it feels pleasant, unpleasant, good or bad, it will quickly evoke emotions. But in terms of the teachings, it really, in Buddhism, it's really like there's that feeling tone that can be sort of separated out a bit. So another way of talking about Vedana is that it's kind of the immediate reaction. It's almost like hardwired into us, just it's a survival thing, really. Because we want to, like, for example, steer away from what's poisonous, it might taste bad, or what's toxic, it smells horrible, I don't want to be in this environment. So, and I think that that's like really obvious, say, in many of the Zen spaces. But I've been personally curious about this taste thing, because I'm noticing that, what others think often tastes wonderful, I don't like, or at least I don't think it's wonderful. But another thing that I'm noticing that's even a little more curious to me, because of course that's always been true, I've just been a little more tuned in. But there's some of the things that I used to dislike that I actually like now. It's confusing for my wife who does the shopping, because it can go the other way. So yesterday we went out to breakfast, and it turns out Tuesdays are not a good day to go out to breakfast, because we went to 2 restaurants that were closed before we found the third one that was open. And this was a vegan restaurant. So we ordered vegan gluten-free waffles, but they were different because they were on the savory side. So they had spinach and mushroom that was cooked right into the batter and topped with tofu scramble. Now, so that made the batter really different, because it had like the juices of the mushrooms and the spinach in the batter. And the first couple of bites, I thought, this is weird. I don't know about this. But then, I kept on eating, and as I kept on going, it got better and better tasting. So even though I'm not sure I would order this again, I hope that this example gets the point across, that Vedana is fluid, it changes, and it's very sense-based, and it's very particular, because, I often joke around, oh, halibut is a great example. All of my friends think halibut is like the best, amazing gourmet fish. And I joke around and say, I don't have halibut taste receptors in my mouth, because it just tastes like any other bland white fish to me. So I say, don't bother spending the money on me. Get me something else. Anyway, the point being that we all have different receptors and experiences of Vedana. So in Buddhism, there's 6 senses, which I always find fascinating. You know, there's the taste, the touch, the smell, the sound, the sight. The 5 we're quite familiar with. And in Buddhism, there's the 6th, which is the sense base of the mind. And I think that's just fascinating. And we've given other talks on it, and we'll give other talks in the future about it. But really, it's the same thing. Do your thoughts feel good? Do they feel bad? Do they feel neither good nor bad? So I think this is a really important area of awareness because, you know, we don't often just tune into the feeling qualities of thoughts. We're so conditioned to go to the content of thoughts. And when you talk about your meditation or when you journal about your meditation, it might be very interesting to tune into, oh, that thought felt really good, because of course that has a lot of impact. The Vedana of thoughts have a lot of impact of what we choose to do about what we're thinking. So earlier in my meditation practice, I really earnestly took up the practice of awareness of Vedana. I found it interesting, but I was also taught that if I could mindfully note Vedana, I could cut the chain of dependent arising. I'm not going to talk much about the teaching of dependent arising right now, but let's just, for simplicity's sake, say it is the process, the chain that leads to suffering. And I was taught that I could cut the chain right there. If I could just be aware of the feeling quality and not take it to where it naturally goes, which is to craving or clinging or running or avoiding, that I could just end all of that. And you know, now I don't quite look at it that way. I think that it's more useful, or equally useful at least, or maybe Vedana is the starting point to look at how complicated it is and how what we say crave and cling to is so deep-seated, and the practice of reflection really helps us see that. But still, Vedana is quite useful. And back then, when that was my earnest practice, it did take me quite a ways. I feel like I have more contentment and less dissatisfaction in my life because I really learned how to notice what feels good. And then I took it a step further than perhaps the Buddhism of that day would have suggested. I really learned to stay with it longer and to sink into it and to enjoy it. Enjoy the little and also the bigger pleasures of my life. And then later on, in reflection, seeing what follows. Does it always lead to clinging and craving? No, not necessarily. But it did help me discern more about what's good, what leads to good, that same good that I was quoted from at the beginning, good for me, good for others, good for the world. And we could say the same thing about, you know, what I experienced Vedana that felt unpleasant. You know, do I turn away from it or not? Or do I look into it? Do I learn from it? So all of this really has, I believe, led me to a more happy life. So I'm going to quote a couple sentences really from Analayo, Bhikkhu Analayo, who's a monk and a prolific writer. Unlike his ascetic contemporaries, the Buddha did not categorically reject all pleasant feelings, nor did he categorically recommend unpleasant feelings for their supposedly purifying effect. Instead, he placed emphasis on the mental and ethical consequences of all types of feelings. So this is the direction in reflection. Looking more deeply, looking again, looking from different sides up into the psychological and the ethical consequences of what feels good, and of course also what doesn't feel good, and really knowing where this takes us, where it takes us in our meditation, where it takes us in terms of the actions we do in our life for our world. And really tracking it, because really pleasantness and unpleasantness is potent, and it has a lot of, well, impact. So back to the quote that I started from. Discerning what feels good from what is good, good for the environment, good for our development, good for our community, good at this time and under the current conditions, ethically good. This is not easy to know. So that ends the talk there. And we're going to move into a period of meditation.